Yeah, and I think that you really hit it with the idea of the funding source, because many of the institutional care settings, especially in Africa, are funded by especially U.S. churches who may not have considered another way. One of the things, working with Food for the Hungry specifically, and we work with mostly development work, when people hear our name, Food for the Hungry, they assume that they're calling up an organization that's going to distribute food. And that's not primarily what we do unless it's a relief setting. And so when we explain the ideas behind community development, in fact, even I went through a 4-week Bible study, and my pastor was part of this study, going in detail about poverty alleviation and how you can truly help people out of poverty. And after those 4 weeks, I thought I had really done a good job explaining, and my pastor said, all that is really good, but it just seems so much harder than passing out food to people. And yeah, and it is, but it's a long-term benefit. And I think we've become very accustomed to sound bites, and so we want a sound bite about orphan care. And you can make the case for putting kids in an institution in 2 sentences, but it takes more time to disciple people into really understanding everything that we just shared. Most of our American Christians are not interested in hearing the longer explanation. So we really need to get at those who are making the decisions about funding, missions pastors, senior pastors of churches, organizations, and then helping them understand a different way. So here in From Faith to Action, we lay out 12 strategies that churches can use when funding orphan care that are different from the model of funding an institution. And then after this publication came out, we had some of that same feedback, like my pastor said about relief and development, some of the same feedback saying, that's all great, but where would we find an organization that does that? How do we actually make that happen? From U.S. soil, how do we make sure that we're funding that? And so that's when we came out with Journeys of Faith, which talks about the case studies of people actually doing it well.
So my second question is for the 2 Wendy's. I've been to an orphanage in Honduras. That was sometime in December, Christmas to New Year. And when I was there, like you said, it's only God. I saw God faces in a lot of those children's faces. I just saw God everywhere that I went. And it was very emotional and touching, but at the same time, I felt like God sent me there for a reason, to get his love through these children, not me loving them, but the other way around. That was the feeling that I got when I went to the orphanage. But one of the common issues that I noticed while I was there was that some of the children that were there, they had both parents. Yes. The reason being is because the parents couldn't take care of them, so they decided to drop the kids off at the orphanage. It was the Pan-American orphanage in Honduras. Okay, so do you guys come in contact with a situation where, like you mentioned earlier, it's not just children that don't have parents anymore, but parents where because the parent felt like they were no longer able to take care of these children, and they have a place as a rescue, I guess, whatever you want to call it, a rescue mission where they can drop off the children? Did you guys come in contact with situations like that?
I definitely, in fact, let me just say, you wouldn't believe how fast parents start showing up when you pull 2 UNICEF buses and have MINUSTA and Haitian police and the New York Police Department in front of an orphanage where they dropped their kid off. So that's a serious problem. Save the Children did a study in a couple of African contexts, and I fear that if they did the same thing in Haiti, well, actually it's underway, the numbers are going to be also quite high, but 86% of the children in orphanages do not need to be there at all. There's just absolutely, and I think that's probably fairly commensurate with the figures that Wendy showed us. Orphan care, we need to care for orphans and vulnerable children, but we have to change the mindset. In Haiti, people want to give you their child, always. That is just, take the kid. And so that's education, that's training we have to do on the Haitian side. But I think in terms of adoption and in terms of so many of these things, Americans' churches, we've got to be aware. You may be adopting a child that has both parents, but the adoption agency may not be telling you that, to be quite frank. Sure, the child will be better off, in terms of, they'll get an education and all that. But I think we are really confused on this issue of dropping children off in orphanages when it's absolutely not in their best interest in terms of the things that Wendy shared. And I could have gone even, I guess I did go quite a bit deep, illustrate that in several ways. But we have to educate the church here in America on this in terms of adoption and even the supporting of these.
If I can just comment on that as you're passing the mic, regarding, I think you said exactly what I would have commented on that, but it brought up a really good point about the idea of Christians from the U.S. going to visit orphanages. And we see this frequently. You may have friends in your life who have sent you a support letter saying, I'm going to serve with children at such and such children's home for 2 weeks. And we just believe that that is not healthy for children. And here's why. Like I mentioned, attachment to a parental figure is extremely important. For children who have that parent, who have that primary attachment, they can meet other people, they can go to school, they can have different caregivers, and if they know they're coming home to mom, then everything's okay. But for children who come from backgrounds where they have lost that primary attachment, and I'm speaking from personal experience. My kids were adopted through foster care, and they were 3 and 4 years old when they came to us, and they had 8 different families whose homes they were in before our home. And it's the same for kids who are in institutions. For children, when they attach to a primary caregiver, it's like, imagine if I put duct tape on your arm, like on the hairiest guy here, and then I ripped that duct tape off. Right? It hurts so much because it attached to the arm. But then if I took it to the next guy and ripped it off of his arm, it would hurt a little less, right? And would hurt less and less and less. Why? Because it's not attaching. My kids, the night I met them, we went to the children's home where they were staying temporarily, and by the end of that evening, they were calling me mommy. And it would be for many people, when they hear that, they say, oh, that's so beautiful. They already knew that you were their mom. And no, they did not, because it took me a year to get them to stop calling other people mommy. They didn't have an idea of what that was. And so this idea of, I just want to really beseech all of us, if we're aware of those programs where volunteers are sent like a revolving staff, it can be, children with attachment issues can have these indiscriminate attachments where they very easily seem to connect with you, but it can be a very, very dangerous thing in their lives to go through that over and over. So again, if you have those people in your life who sent you a support letter, I'd encourage you to send them to our website, which is really easy to remember, faithbasedcarefororphans.org.
Hi. So, as you guys are talking about, I'm Michelle Odlum, and I'm from New York, and I currently work and teach at the University of New York in the system. And I hear you guys talking, and I completely understand that. And I've done AIDS work in the past, and talk about families who are infected and affected by AIDS, and whether the kids are orphaned or the grandparents don't have their caregiver when they get older, and there's just so much impact when it comes to children and families as a whole. And my family's from the Caribbean, and my great-grandmother and grandmother, they've raised several kids that weren't theirs. People have dropped kids off, and it's just like the common thing. One of my uncles brought home a friend one day and said to my great-grandmother, oh, he wants to stay here. And so she said, but what about your mother? He said, well, she already has 10 other kids. I said, well, if she says okay, you can come. And he came, and he was about 12, and he stayed till he graduated high school and went and became a policeman. So that's just how things are. But at no time were there any social services. provided. And that's what it is, because here in this country, at least, not that the foster care system is perfect, but at least the government provides social services for children in need. And so my grandmother and great-grandmother and all of them used whatever means that they had to take care. And so as we talk about orphans being in the family setting or within families, and we talk about faith-based organizations and what can be provided, can you guys speak a little about those social service needs? And we watched a video, we talked about the support, and I believe it comes down to like whatever structured social service needs can be fulfilled through faith-based organizations.
I fully agree with that. I think that the challenge often is to get communities to really think constructively about what they have to offer. One gal who's been very successful in mobilizing churches in Zimbabwe has actually had to ask them, do you have hands? Do you have feet? What can you do with those? Do you have a voice? What can you do with what can you do with that? To get them to really examine that. I think one of the dangers in some cases might be dependency. If you've seen another village even get outside assistance, then you're looking for it yourself and you're not thinking what you can really add yourself. Another thought that you had raised, and I was trying to remember something about attachment, but a community can become a source of attachment for a child if they function correctly. There can be many caregivers. We talk about extended family providing many caregivers. The community really can be a community if it functions well as a community of caregivers, and it can give different kinds of care. My wife often reminds me that when we worry about our children going out to play and where they're at, she said, well, back home, all the neighbors are watching the kids, and so you just let them go,
Yeah, and I think it speaks to who's going to be the hero. And many times the faith-based organization feels like they need to paint themselves as the hero so that people will fund them, and that might have some programmatic implications. But as Christians, we should believe that Jesus is the hero. And that what that means for our programs is that God's going to use every person in that child's life. And so if it's appropriate for a faith-based organization to even come in and partner alongside, then whatever they're doing needs to be shoring up the existing options for children and making sure that we're not removing any of the God-given responsibilities that the family and the community and the local church and the government have.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of service provision, the social service and the psychological damage for children in orphanages is staggering, and it's something that we've been trying to address the past few years with things like toy libraries and development, ASQs, various testings, depression, children's depression scales, all these type of things. But there are very few of us in overseas doing this type of thing specifically. Right now, I'll be frank, if there are any Creole-speaking people here who have any background in psychosocial support, I will help you get a ticket to go back with me, because I've got 62 kids extremely traumatized by what they've experienced. And we just don't have the resources in Haiti to deal with that. I want to see Christian universities continue building stronger mental health programs. Right now I'm working with Wheaton College and Regent University. We're doing a study on spiritually oriented trauma-based cognitive behavioral therapy. So I knew if I tried to do the letters, my dyslexia would get the best of me. But clearly, we're working at it. We've been doing this for years. In terms of the psychosocial support programs, we're learning so much so fast. Ever since the Nairobi bomb blast, I helped coordinate the trauma response for that in mental health. And there's a lot we can do, but we need help. People need to go into those fields. Christians need to understand that psychology, and when we say psychosocial, it's because it is psychological and it is social. It is about relationships. I mean, these are biblical things. As Christians, I think we own that. That's us. It's our, we should be standing up and getting the psychosocial support to these kids faster than anyone. That's what they need. So thank you for that question, and I want to see you later, just in case you know Creole. Thank you.